It's Rami and Donnie from Pastoral Formation, Diocese of Parramatta. We're bringing to you another episode of the Soul Food Podcast, sharing life-giving conversations and stories that nourish the soul.
You know those meals that you never want to end because it was such a good feed? That's the feeling people's stories give us, and that's the sort of response we want you to experience after you listen to this episode.
Hello and welcome everyone to the Soul Food Podcast. We're here today with Alison, Ryan. Yeah, woo.
Hey, Al.
Yeah, so good. We're also here with Donnie and myself, Rami, and we're excited to learn more about this person that we have joining our Pastoral Formation team.
Alison, I'm sure you'll touch on some of this as you share your story with us today. But for our listeners, why don't we just give them a bit of a short bio of who you are, starting from your involvement, your extensive involvement, I might add, in parish community and parish ministry, from youth and young adults to music to being on the Pastoral Council. You've also had a long-standing connection with the Antioch movement. You've studied theology both here in Australia and abroad, and you're also part of the previous Parramatta Diocese Youth Pastoral Council or Youth Council. And that's all before you've decided to transition from your current role, being a pastoral associate in Terrigal Parish. You've now joined Pastoral Formation in the Diocese of Parramatta. Thanks for being on the show with us.
How are you going, Alison?
I'm doing okay. I'm a bit tired. I'm just backing up from a friend's wedding, and so jumping from a weekend away back into work has been fun. It's strange when you have to rest after rest, but you know, that's where we're at.
Well, congratulations to your friend.
That's right. It was a great party.
Yeah, nice. So for those of you who haven't had the chance to meet Alison, you will, hopefully, throughout the diocese. But to share a bit about her, she grew up in St. Anthony's Parish in Toongabbie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and loved serving there. What's some of the things that you were involved in?
Yeah, so I was born and baptised and raised there. And so, from a really young age, I was an overhead girl. Yeah, all right. If we remember the overhead projectors.
Does that mean you did cartwheels or?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could. That would have been amazing. But very proudly, clicked the overhead projector on so that everyone could sing.
Crucial.
And that actually sort of started my desire, I think, to join the choir, because I'd always be looking at the choir. And so then through our youth group, through our Antioch group, I was able to sort of start doing a bit more music and learnt guitar and little things like that. And so joined choirs and led choirs and did things like that. And then, actually I was the youngest member of the Pastoral Council ever in Toongabbie Parish history when I joined at 18. Wow. Just as soon as I could, I wanted to jump into as much leadership as possible. Mm-hmm. And so that was a big learning experience for me there. And so, served on hospitality committees or the liturgy committee, loads of things. So just really loved to be able to be of service to the community as I grew up.
Brilliant. We do have a question that we ask everyone who comes onto the space. You might have heard it before, Alison.
I might have, because I might have done my homework.
But we do ask everyone who comes on Soul Food what their last memorable dish or meal was, and what comes to mind for you.
So I want to trick you and give you two. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Because it occurred to me today that they're quite funny. So the last memorable one was a couple of weeks ago. My friend Natty was graduating. Congratulations, Natty. And her boyfriend had planned a surprise dinner at a Brazilian restaurant. Mm-hmm. Have you guys done Brazilian?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so
amazing.
Much just meat of all kinds available. Just, people who walk around and cut meat onto your plate.
Yeah, on the skewers.
On the skewers, yeah.
Yep.
And so every meat you can possibly think of, and like a couple of cheeses, and you finish with this pineapple with cinnamon sugar, right? And I had no idea. I'd never done it before, but it was a huge deal. And then the bookend is this weekend I'm going to a vegan restaurant.
Ooh.
So I've gone from extreme meat to extreme vegan. So Bodhi restaurant in the city, which is brilliant. They do all vegan yum cha. And the number of times that I've been there and the people I go with are like, so, that one's chicken and that one's prawn. I'm like, none of it's chicken or prawn. It just tastes like, and they're like, what? I thought I was eating. Anyway, so it's, they're my two most memorable that I've been thinking about recently and bookending quite different ways of eating.
Mm-hmm. That sounds so delicious.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Both of them. They're both great.
Yeah, and it's a great experience trying out different cuisines, particularly Brazilian, which isn't as common as, say, for example, you mentioned yum cha or, the good old steak, but to try meat in a different way, that's pretty cool.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And, and I love being able to move sort of fluidly in that way, sort of really enjoying vegan yum cha or jumping into, the crazy, and it's usually just quite plain meat as well. So you get the amazingness of the food for what it is, not for all the spices and the everything else. So,
in saying that, I find that you're coming across as someone who's eclectic and open to different things.
Yeah.
Remy mentioned earlier that you're jumping onto our team, or you're now part of our team. So just wanted to hear a little bit of your story as to the different places where you felt has led to this point of saying, yes, I want to be part of Pastoral Formation in the Diocese of Parramatta. And just use as many stories as you can from different experiences just to give us a bit of insight on who is Al Ryan and what she hopes to offer in this ministry.
Yeah, well, who is Al Ryan? I was born at a very early age, as they say. But I guess career-wise, it's always been church or childcare, not-for-profit childcare community run sort of things, and it's only been recently that I've been reflecting that actually I think I've always wanted that. I've never wanted to sort of work in an office or do 9-to-5s and those sorts of things, but I often have said about my life that I've fallen into it. I've accidentally got a job here, like I accidentally got a job in childcare when I was, in my 19 or 20, I think, and accidentally sort of moved in this direction or that. And of course, in hindsight, I can say, well, something was moving in my life, and I now would give that all to God and to the Spirit, but at the time you don't know, and so it's those sorts of things. But so working part-time or full-time every now and again in parishes around Parramatta and in Broken Bay Diocese as well. Got a shout out to Broken Bay. That was my first and most recent jobs were in Broken Bay. So working with people is a huge thing for me. Big youth ministry background stemming from, I guess, my formation in the Antioch youth movement, which was, a good decade of my formative years, and I'm very grateful for that. And then, the desire to want to continue that movement, to invite other people into the experiences, into the love, into the community that I found through Antioch, meant that I wanted to go and be a youth minister. And so I did that and was connected in a lot of ways with sacramental processes and different things like that in parishes. And so that led to adult faith formation because I was working with families and their parents and somebody was saying, you say all this great stuff to the kids, can you say something to us? I'm like, oh yeah, sure. And so it just sort of naturally developed to support different parish groups in that way. And so then I went to Israel. Is that a weird sort of conjecture? I don't know.
No.
And then I went to Israel one time.
I feel like that's again eclectic.
Eclectic. I know.
The word?
It is a bit strange. Yeah. So I went to Israel in 2009 on a study tour and I was sort of feeling a bit out of my depth. I'd never really done too much study other than high school, and I wasn't very good at that. And so I went over with a small group from Australia and studied scripture with Jewish rabbis, with Christian scholars
Wow.
in the land, and understanding something of the historical context, of the cultural context, and it just blew everything open for me. I distinctly remember actually walking through a grapevine area in Jerusalem one day and thinking, oh, this is what you should do with your life. You love this stuff. And so from that, experience, an amazing experience, I came back to Australia and enrolled in a theology degree, and did that I did that sort of part-time because I wanted to make sure that I could do all my readings. How nerdy is that? I wanted to make sure I could do my readings. But, get everything done and didn't have to rush through it. So I did that working part-time in ministry, and loved it every second of it. Turned out I was actually not too bad at university when it was something that I was really passionate about. And so I did my degree with a major in biblical studies and another arts major in drama, which was always, the norm as well. That eclectic thing you were saying. But, so I did that. And so that's been really amazing, obviously, in helping me work in parishes more and work with people more. Amazing degree experience with Australian Catholic University and the Catholic Institute of Sydney.
Another shout out.
Yeah, shout out. That's right. And then I guess that's how I came here. I just, the opportunity to work as a pastoral formation facilitator for my home diocese, I couldn't turn it down. And so I thought I'd give it a crack. And they seemed to like me and my experiences and my vision. And I certainly love and believe in the vision of the diocese as well. So is that okay? I've arrived.
Totally.
Thank you. I'm checking.
It's incredible, actually, to hear more of your story. And to me, what I'm hearing is it sounds like quite an adventure that you've been on. Even from your early introduction, you're saying you started with the overhead projector.
Yes.
And you just say yes, and then you notice things. You're like, oh, you notice the choir, and then just throughout life, you've noticed these opportunities. And so grateful to have you on the Pastoral Formation team. I think we're going to have a lot of fun, but also working on a vision together. I think that will be, I'm really excited and really happy that you're here. So,
Me too. I can't wait. It's sort of weird. I'm the new kid, but I'm definitely older than you two. So it's sort of like a weird balance that we'll have to strike. Because I'll be like, yes, I'm the old wise one. And how do I do that? Teach me.
I have a question.
Sure.
For yourself. You mentioned that you were in an area with the vines and
it was a garden, but they had these beautiful grape trellises.
Yes.
Yeah, it was gorgeous.
And you had that moment this is what I want to do, this is what I love to do. What would you say to someone who is looking at exploring scripture? Because the reason why I ask this is because I went to a public school in my senior year, so year 11 and 12. And doing religion in public school is interesting. You meet a lot of different people. Your perspective has widened. I had this moment where I was like, what? Not everyone is Catholic? Because I went to a Catholic school from kindergarten to year 10. And so the different questions would come up. And it was really someone in a different Christian denomination who opened my eyes to loving scripture. And so I guess for you, as someone that I know that loves scripture, how would you, what would you say to someone who's open to exploring that?
Yeah, wow. I guess that there's that sort of classic joke about Catholics not being really good at scripture. And I guess I have, again, Antioch to thank for that, because on my first weekend I got given a little Bible. Everybody did, everyone who came along got a little Bible, and I've still got it. It's in my car, all marked up, loads of things in there. And it was something that I've carried around since I was 15 or something on my first weekend, I think, and so having that just ease in experience of you can read this, and when you read it, you don't have to be right or wrong. That was sort of the feel that I got for it. So I could just read it, and if I had questions, I could have questions, and if I found something beautiful, I could find it beautiful, and however that was. So I would say, get a Bible.
Nice.
Number one, and a lot of people ask me about like what the best Bible is, and the best Bible is the one you're going to read. Because it's no use buying a Bible and then putting it on the shelf because it's beautiful or because it's, a particular translation. Or if you're not going to read it, why is it there? And then it steps after that. It depends on how you want to read the Bible. Do you want to engage in it devotionally? Well, we have in the Catholic tradition, the lectionary, those daily readings that can be a really beautiful devotional way of engaging with Scripture that doesn't necessarily have to take in a historical context or something like that. But if you want to learn more about where the Scriptures came from and how they were brought together, well, there's loads of great Australian scholars. I mean, Laurie Woods, who I know is a big fan of we're a big fan of him. The Pastoral Formation team is a big fan of Laurie's. He was one of my lecturers at ACU. And so, I got to learn from him and a lot of others. Michelle Connolly was my Gospels lecturer. And so there's loads of resources, even just in Australia, but all over the place, of people who can really help take that next step into learning more. But to say... I guess the greatest thing that I ever want people to think about the Bible is that I can read it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a story, like it's a book that was not written to you. It was written to a group of people 2,000 to 4,000 years ago on the other side of the world, but it is written for you. Mm-hmm. And so if you can pick that up and in some way, not necessarily understand it or be able to write an essay about it or anything like that, but just to read it as something that is for me, even though it's not to me in that sort of literal sense that it was written in a time and place, so just pick up a Bible. How's that?
That's great. That's a great question as well, Remy. I like that distinction 2 and 4 because it really honors the Jewish tradition that we stand in debt to as Christians, and also acknowledging that something about the Bible transcends time and space and can connect with us in a special way. You've mentioned a couple of times, and I think just for the interest of listeners who have never come across it by chance, Antioch.
Oh, yeah.
If you could summarize what that is, or
sure.
If you're going to introduce someone to Antioch, where would you start and what would you say?
Yeah, so Antioch is a parish-based peer-to-peer ministry program, and it was the first of its kind in Australia in the 1980s, and so it blew up. When there's no other youth ministries happening, it goes everywhere. At its peak, there was, I think, 1 in 3 parishes across Australia had an Antioch group. Wow. And so it spread like wildfire across Australia when it was first introduced. And so it was a community of young people between about the ages of 15 to early 20s, who would meet together weekly and then would run what were called outreach weekends once or twice a year to evangelize and welcome new people into the community. And these weekends would take you through a whole bunch of talks that the young people would give, heaps of music, heaps of fun, heaps of community building, and welcoming new people into that community. So that's how it sort of stayed alive and stayed vibrant over the years. Antioch is so multi-layered that I could do a whole podcast just on Antioch, but that's where I learnt to be a leader. It's where I learnt to be a musician. It's where I learnt to be someone who shares life with other Christians. It's where I learnt to be someone who is connected to and grounded in my parish. All of these things and more, and so much of it is what I like to call like ninja. Like you don't notice it happening at the time. It's like a secret ninja, how you get connected, and that's part of the beauty of it. Like I on my first weekend met 30 amazing young people, but actually what I was meeting was Jesus. In these people, I was encountering Jesus, and I didn't know that. I was 15 and just thought, wow, you guys are cool, and that was sort of part of the brilliance and the simplicity of Antioch. And it's still going. There's still a bunch of groups around Australia, but it's certainly, what a wonderful problem is one of the phrases about it, because all of the Antiochers from the 80s are now leaders in the church and they're running their own sort of stuff. And so, it's a wonderful problem to not have as many as there used to be, because there's so many more opportunities,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. It sounds like a lot of my experience as well, growing up in my formative years and being in a Christian community, people same age. I think one of the moments where I was like, what? That's a Christian? It's someone who was playing in music ministry, and they were, shredding away on their guitar, and I was like, well, and then them linking that with prayer, like that was a form of prayer for them. I was like, whoa, you can do that? I always thought it was just going to church. That was the way to pray, and so it just opened my eyes to that. Something that you've mentioned in your story is meeting Jesus in people. Tell me a bit more about that.
So what I would term relational ministry. So where we meet Christ in those that we come across in any part of the world. It doesn't have to be in our parishes. Some of the most amazing encounters with Christ that I've had are people that I've just met on the street, or people that I've come across randomly at a party or something like that. But the idea that that when we really look to see that God and Christ in particular is in all of creation, is the divine spark in all of us, that's the sort of crazy upside downness of what we believe as Christians, is through the Spirit that God is in us, has decided to make his dwelling in us. And so when we open ourselves up to see and understand that that's what I'm doing. So when I meet somebody, I'm meeting Christ. When I encounter an idea from a person, then I'm encountering something of God. That's sort of part of what I've learnt. Like I said, a bit ninja, a bit sort of accidentally, but also what I try and take into all of my ministry, in all of my work with people, and hopefully on the train, and hopefully, when I'm walking down the street, all of those things,
One thing I picked up from one of the podcasts that we released before, Len Blahut was actually mentioning it, the difference between hearing and listening, where hearing is this openness to the things around you, and before you can take it in, you need to hear first, and then it's in the chewing of that stuff, that's when you listen. I think just throughout, be it scripture, childcare, your involvement in Antioch, you come across Alison as this person who is really receptive to the Spirit's movement in your life. And I'm just wondering how that then, to use an expression from Rami now, how your adventure in the Parramatta Diocese now comes to working with people. What does that look like in a practical way? What does this part of your journey look like for you?
I mean, you're giving me a lot of credit. I think that it is, the adventure, and it is something that I am open and receptive, but I don't know if I know it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost part of the fun, you know, in some ways, where you look back and say, oh, I see how the Spirit's weaving there. So one of my portfolios as I move into this pastoral formation team is actually going to be going out into parishes and supporting parish renewal, pastoral planning, and in particular working with pastoral councils, deanery councils, and the diocesan councils. So that's, I guess, like, it's the real people on the ground stuff of the diocese, you know, that it doesn't make any sense for us to be here working in this team except if we're working with people, you know. And so I have that great privilege of being able to walk with them as they discern, you know, the best ways forward for their individual communities or deaneries or the diocese, to be, you know, they're working. I guess I've been trying to think about this. I think working for the bishop with the people or something like that, because he's got great vision. And we're really blessed to have a bishop with such great vision. And so, you know, my job is to sort of draw people into that vision and then ask them to listen and to be the voice of the people around them, for the bishop again. And so, you know, being part of that movement is going to be great fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, a couple of things just hearing you say that. Big task. It sounds massive.
Oh, yeah. No, I'll get it done next week.
I mean, like,
no,
you know,
probs,
what is it? 300?
Just
300,000
Catholics.
Yeah, it's
Parramatta, no probs. No.
But that language being thrown around now, combination of, you know, the Spirit, and I suppose you'd hope good planning around it as well. This language of synedality that's happening.
Very much so.
It seems like that's one of the things that you'll take around to the parishes. But just so that for the parish people who are listening to us now, in particular those involved in parish councils, what are some of the things that you'll keep in mind as you engage with them, as maybe one or two sort of principles that you'll say, okay, as I visit people, work with parish councils, these will be my two things that I keep in the back of my mind as I journey with people? What would you say those things are?
Gosh, I mean, you're asking me to narrow it down, and I've got about 75 things.
Or how about the first two things that come to mind without any particular priority?
I think first and foremost, I hope that I'll be able to help them create spaces to fill with as they see fit. You know, the space is the first question. Can we make a space where people are able to be heard, be seen, be understood, be known, be loved, all of those things. So space as a first thing, but then we've got to fill that space. And I think one of the things that keeps coming back to me is specifically with pastoral councils, how do we do listening? And that's very much in the synodal sort of process. But it can be an airy-fairy idea of, oh yes, we listen, and that's good and important, but how do we do it in a way that is practical and measurable, I guess. So my hope is that, we'll be able to bring this, some scaffolding ideas to this space that we create together, and then fill that space with the support of different tools, with the voice of the people, with the needs of the local parishioners or the local community more broadly even, and how we as a diocese can then journey more towards, the ideals of certainly synodality, certainly co-responsibility with the bishop, addressing particular needs as they arrive individually.
Yeah. It sounds like a joyful approach to the people of God working together. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, so synodality meaning walking together, and and we had lockdown for a couple of years, and all we could do was walk, within a 5-kilometer radius. I don't know if you remember that.
Great insight.
And and so that was, I guess, insight into what we would be doing in a spiritual sense as well in our ministry, walking together. It's not just about listening, but also arriving somewhere at a destination together. And this accompaniment, like, it's not just someone talking at someone, but also sharing ideas and working it out together. And looking forward to that happening more. I find that when I was visiting parishes that, some parishes were already doing this and they didn't have that language of synedality to name it, but it's beautiful to see and to make that come alive in our work. So,
and I'm definitely learning. Like, that's my whole experience immediately. But I hope that it's going to be continuing to be my experience. There's no use trying to do something that works somewhere and say, let's transplant it exactly to another parish or another community, because it's not going to work. You can take some of the core principles like cinedality, like 100 other things, but part of it is that journeying to find out what fits, what works, how are we going to move forward here. Not how would you move forward if you were somewhere else, but the here and now, and being a learner the whole way through.
So we're heading towards the end of the podcast and sharing great stories and insights and hopes, I think. And I want to end on this hope sort of note. Part of the journey of listening to other people and learning, as you mentioned. I wanted to ask you, Alison, what would be your ideal experience of being a Catholic?
An ideal experience of being a Catholic. I'm going to have to steal somebody else's wise words. I want to say it's James Mallon, the Father James, who wrote Divine Renovation, that talked about the Catholic Church being a place where you are known and you are loved. And that, I think, is something that scares us. To be really known and to be really loved, I think, is something that scares us in terms of me being known and loved and having to know and to love. But that's got to be the bottom line, right? That's got to be the bottom line when we're talking about being a Catholic, being part of the church that says that Jesus is our model, right? Because he knew and loved. He knew everybody and he loved everybody. And so if I were to become a part of a community, a local community, and I could say that I felt known and felt loved and I knew and I loved people, then I think that would be the ideal for me.
I love that. That's quite profound. And I think for us, as we close off this podcast, just to reflect for ourselves in the faith communities that we are in our friendships, in our families, with strangers, how do we, or in a parish community particularly for those who are listening, how do we know people? Do we know people? And how do we show this love to others who walk through our parish doors or our parish offices? Yeah. So thank you, Alison.
And Alison, just really looking forward to creating wonderful things with you in the diocese. We're so lucky to have you as part of Pastoral Formation.
I'm feeling super lucky to be here. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Donnie. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Soul Food Podcast. Don't forget to like and follow us on Spotify or on your preferred listening platform.
This podcast is produced by Pastoral Formation Mission Enhancement Team in the Diocese of Parramatta. All relevant links will be provided in the description below. See you at our next meal on the Soul Food Podcast.